Madam is here and she is about to enter the hall. I kindly request you to rise to welcome the dignitaries. The best public policies are the ones that take shape from constructive engagements. Today, we are gathered here for one such interaction. The Union Budget for the year 22-23 was presented in the Parliament by the Honourable Finance Minister on the 1st of February. Since then, the Finance Minister has been holding a series of interactions with industry and trade across the country. Today, we are privileged to host such an interaction for the trade community at Bengaluru. At the outset, let me extend a very warm welcome to the Honourable Union Minister of Finance and Corporate Affairs, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman. I request the Principal Chief Commissioner of Central Taxes, GST, Bengaluru Zone, Ms. Ranjana Jha, to welcome the Honourable Finance Minister with a sapling. Now, let me please request the Principal Chief Commissioner of Income Tax, Karnataka and Goa region, Shri Dinesh Patwari, to welcome the Honourable Union Minister of State for Finance, Shri Pankaj Chaudhary, with a sapling. Next, I request the Principal Chief Commissioner of Customs, Bengaluru Zone, Shri M. Srinivas, to welcome the Honourable Union Minister of State for Finance, Dr. Bhagwat Karad, with a sapling. We also extend a very warm welcome to all the senior secretaries of Ministry of Finance who have joined us here today. We also take this opportunity to welcome the esteemed members of the trade, industry and media to this post-budget interaction session. As we enter into Amrit Kal, with this budget laying down a 25-year-long pathway to achieve the goals set for India at 100, the Union Finance Minister's presence here to interact with all the stakeholders assumes great importance. To visualize our common aspirations, I now invite the Honourable Union Minister of Finance and Corporate Affairs to deliver her opening address.
Namaskara. Good morning to be in Bangalore, to be with you all and to all of you all. It's always a pleasure to come back and interact with people in Bengaluru. I think much has been already spoken about the budget, what is in it, and also analyzed from various different angles. Not much would I want to say in the opening introductory remark, except that I think it's obvious by now that this budget stands more for continuity, to provide a tax predictable regime, and also to make sure that we are planning for the next 20-25 years, gives a vision and also some kind of a route map through which we want to achieve fundamental infrastructure which will help us to be proud of ourselves, be sure that we've adequately endowed ourselves to stand up and celebrate India at 100. It has brought in a lot of technology, brought in a lot of digitization of the economy, and doesn't forget the fact that we are still coming out of the COVID pandemic. We need to have all the support systems, particularly for health, completely stabilized and strengthened, and also for making up for the children who have lost out on 2 years of education, bridging the gaps. Equally making sure that states have a participatory role in whatever we are doing, so the funds are being shared with them so that they can actively engage in infrastructure building as well. Broader principles of getting synergy out of all the investments being made both by the center and the states for infrastructure, so that the multiplier effect is really going to benefit and the investments going to have synergetic effects. So each one of the investment doesn't stand alone in a silo. We've brought in the principle of PM Gati Shakti, which in fact will be like an umbrella over the several projects, all of which will have to have giving in and taking out kind of a benefit from each other's presence. So the synergy of the various investments which are happening in different areas, whether they are ports or roads or bridges or trains, will have to fall into each other's domain and give us a collective strength, which as infrastructure, particularly for a country which pays heavily for its logistics costs, businesses suffer because of the money which goes for making up for the extreme disadvantage that you face because of lack of enough logistical convenience, will all be brought together because of this synergetic approach which Gati Shakti gives. So it is that budget that we are here to discuss, and I am very happy that the Ministry of Finance and the top officials have taken equal interest in coming around to different parts of the country and being in the presence of all the industry, talk about questions related to their respective areas. And this team actually from here goes to Assam next, so that the Northeast gets covered. So I am happy for all of these leaders before me in Karnataka, businesses and trade and industry, to be here on a Monday morning to be able to discuss a lot of things. I am sure the discussion will be of mutual benefit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your illuminating thoughts, which have set the perfect tone for the upcoming interaction. With your permission, ma'am, let us move towards the interactive part of today's event. The floor is now open for queries, requests, observations from the members of the trade and industry. We will be announcing the names one by one, and the mic will be passed on to you for making your observations. First, I would like to call upon Shri Vikram Kirloskar, Vice Chairman of Toyota Kirloskar Motor Private Limited, to pose his query.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, gentlemen. Very pleased you could come all the way to Bangalore and address all of us here. Ma'am, may I indulge you for 3 small points. The first one is the budget basically has, to my mind, I have no really any detailed questions of the budget. I just have a concern on the economy going forward, representing the automobile industry, especially on the entry-level side, whether it's two-wheelers and especially two-wheelers. We've had one of the lowest growth rates in the last 9 years, or lowest numbers in the last 9 years, absolute numbers. And this is perhaps a result of less demand in the rural economy, and we are not able to really explain why it's come so low. It's still continuing at a low level, and perhaps this could be looked at, how to enhance demand, especially of the entry-level items coming in. This is point number 1, ma'am. The second one, the Prime Minister has a vision of, and has given a vision for the country, and it's important for all of us, of energy efficiency and energy dependence. And perhaps it's a good time to start a dialogue with all stakeholders on, is it worthwhile taxing or higher GST on low efficiency products and lower GST on high efficiency products as we go ahead. Is it possible to have a discussion which we could start like a carbon tax so that in the next budget perhaps we could start looking at it, whether it's worthwhile, whether it will help us with the environment, climate change, as well as energy self-reliance on energy. And the third is something in the budget also you talked about ease of doing business. And I have one small request. I'll give the paper to you. This is regarding Section 236 of the Companies Act 2013. A lot of sections of the Companies Act 2013 have not really been made into rules. And although it's still difficult to get things done through that. And I'd leave a small paper on that, please. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Next, I request Shri Anand Deshpande, Finance Controller of Intel Technology India Private Limited, to share his thoughts.
Hello, ma'am. Good morning, and good morning, everybody, for coming in and this occasion to hear to us. Couple of things, suggestions, recommendations from a tax standpoint. As we are all aware, we have the tax disputes. That's one of the key concerns of the industry and the government. Given the high interest, high penalties, that causes due to the litigation, some of the schemes like Vivad Se Vishwas schemes have been really good and well appreciated. Industry has taken advantage of that. One recommendation was, can we evaluate to extend that at the assessment level so that companies can take a decision to say opt for a litigation or pay the tax and don't go for litigation. It sort of ensures revenue for the government and also avoids litigation from a long duration. That's one. The second thing is related to this is most of the disputes are related to transfer pricing. Now I know there has been a APA scheme that's been proposed. However, we do see that it takes significant amount of time to conclude an APA, as well as it could be a map as well. As we see, the final outcome in an APA or in a map is quite lower than what would have been at the tax assessment level. So some kind of rationalization at the TP assessment level will help the industry to a large extent. Thank you.
On the APA level, we were quite behind schedule and things were not happening. But over the past 6 months after I had the new board, complete board, we have started that activity, and you must have seen that there have been a lot of movement on the APA front. At the tax assessment level, I would like you to engage with me separately and give me your suggestions as to what exactly do you want or what is it that you are mentioning. If there's something, I'll be too happy to see that we don't get into disputes and are able to sort out those disputes. So I look forward to that.
I'd just like to get back to the question from Mr. Kirloskar. So I think the point that you make about a carbon tax, to an extent our existing tax system already has a carbon tax. It is called a tax on petrol and diesel. And it is through that we disincentivize the use of polluting vehicles, which unfortunately for your industry, the relatively higher tax on petrol, diesel versus, for example, the concessional duty on electric cars, it is over a period of time may have a structural effect, one. Two, I think on the tax disputes in general, I would make a suggestion that I think industry also has a role in terms of reducing tax disputes. I think there is a tendency in this country to not leave any loophole unexplored. That is a sort of philosophy with which it is approached by the accounting profession, and this advice is tendered at a high expensive cost to industry. Industry buys the advice. And even in one of the famous cases of so-called retrospective taxation, which has now thankfully been resolved, the advice to the company was that this is a strategy which may work or may not work, but let's try it. And that is the one that caused a lot of grief to a lot of people. So I think I would just appeal that while there are many genuine problems and many things that the government needs to correct, obviously, I don't deny that in any way. But there are also cases where industry seeks, very deep loopholes on some very speculative interpretation and says, let's try this, because if we win, then it'll be good. So I think there is an attitudinal change needed on both sides, is what I would suggest.
I think the Finance Secretary has provoked me to say something which I thought I'll say, but now I'll say it. I'll give you some examples how it goes up. Recently, some of the corporates have got a favorable ruling from some high courts that cess is an expenditure, while the Supreme Court has also held that cess and surcharge are income tax and are obviously not an expenditure. So what happened was that once this ruling came, we found that in all the tax disputes that were going on, one additional point was taken by the lawyers in every court saying that cess is an expenditure and not an item after profit before tax. So if that actually comes through, it's a huge impact on the government. Basically, I would say that in future we could also have an occasion where tax itself becomes an expenditure rather than being after. Similarly, there was an item that if you have violated any law and any expenditure that you make in terms of a compromise or in terms of compounding that is not eligible as an expense. But the interpretation given or the case fought was that this is relevant as far as India is concerned. If I have a similar case, say, outside India, then it is not applicable. And there is a favorable ruling out there also, which we have again plugged in this particular bill. Third is that if you get an exempt income, then the expenditure on that is not eligible as part of the expenditure because the income is exempt. So you say that if I have carried out an expenditure, but it did not result in the exempt income, then that expenditure should be allowed. So what I find is that what is actually happening is that I make a lock on my door, there's a key that opens it. Then I do another lock, and I create so much of complexity in the law just to close these loopholes. So I would say, I didn't want to say that, now that my colleague has said this. So I think it's a role both of us have to play. We need to make our laws simple. We need to take away all unnecessary exemptions. But at the same time, I think industry and larger industry, I can say this in Bangalore, maybe I can't say this in other places. You also have a role to play. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I call upon Ms. Sandhya Sriram, CFO of Narayana Health, to present her questions.
Namaskara, ma'am. First of all, I would like to thank you for a very progressive Amritkal budget that you've given us. From the hospital industry, I have three representations to make to you. One is that while output GST in hospital is exempt, because it's exempt, therefore we lose input credit on a lot of costs that we incur. And therefore the concept of bringing the overall cost of essential services down gets defeated. So I want to place before your good self to consider a zero-rated tax or a nominal 1% kind of GST so that we can avail our input credits. The second request, ma'am, is that as a hospital, we serve a lot of government schemes. And because of the cash flow cycles that happen in the government schemes, therefore our collections get significantly delayed from time to time. So I wanted to place before you, if you could direct nationalized banks to factor these receivables at discounted rates, because these are 100% secure government receivables, then it would really help us with our working capital cycles. Lastly, ma'am, we are grateful to you that the health insurance premium is a deductible expenditure, and therefore it enables people to meet their unforeseen healthcare needs. And healthcare need is really, it can make or break for a middle class, as you are aware. But because it's a part of a pool of incentives, sometimes it gets deprioritized when people are making choices. So we wanted to place before you if there can be a specific deduction specifically for health insurance premium, so that people are encouraged to take more and more health insurance premium, and therefore they get covered for their healthcare needs. Thank you so much for the opportunity, ma'am, and all the best for you also, ma'am. Thank you.
Firstly, I think on the point that you make about cash flow and payment of government dues, I think both your points are valid. One, I think the government dues need to be paid more promptly, and certainly we'll work on that. But second, I think it's an interesting suggestion that receivables be taken into account by banks since they are government receivables. I'm sure my colleague will take a look at that. On the, I think on the specific issue of the exemption or a carved out exemption for health insurance, I will leave that to my colleague. But I would add one thing, that in the government's general vision, we don't see health insurance as the route for mass healthcare. Health insurance is a route for those who can pay. Our thrust in healthcare has been on expanding public healthcare through government hospitals, primary health centers, the National Health Mission, both rural and urban, and the Prime Minister's Jan Arogya Yojana. So the thrust in the government system is more on expanding public healthcare, which is free at the point of service, rather than on using insurance, because international experience doesn't indicate that the insurance solution is the best solution for mass healthcare.
Yesterday, I have been here since Friday evening. So yesterday in the evening, I visited a doctor here. So I had the opportunity of discussing with her what she's actually been working in a public hospital for long, and now she's working here in a private hospital. So my counter question to you is that if this input tax credit is allowed, will you pass on this benefit to the patient? And will we know that you have passed on this benefit to the patient? Or the hospitals are pricing their products not on the basis of the cost, but on other things. For example, if I take a best private room, the surgeon charges on me are much higher as compared to if I take a general ward, though the doctor is providing the same service. So I would say that while we ask for these benefits, I also think we should have a look at as to what is the benefit that we'll provide to the patients or to the people. Because if it is working on market forces, then that logic of yours does not hold true. Though because the final product is not taxable to that extent, that is the reason that you're not given. And even if it is 1%, then one of your economists sitting here will say that you're creating another rate in GST and making it more complicated. So I think you really need to think about it, think that I need this, why do I need this, will I pass on that benefit to the people? On your specific deduction my colleague here has answered something. I don't know, I was in the insurance sector way back in 2006. I don't know whether the penetration has really gone up since then, though the benefits are continuing for very, very long time. Is it because of the benefits, tax benefits, that people take insurance, or people should take insurance because they need insurance and insurance is something that helps? I think this is something that the insurance companies and all of you have to think about. My own view is that we should be selling products on the strength of products. We should take away these benefits. Maybe health benefits should remain because that's a very important part, but the other benefits I feel should go away, and people should be taking these products on the strength of the product and just not on the tax benefits.
Thank you. Next, we have Shri P.K. Murugan, President of JSW Vijayanagar Steelworks.
Good morning, ma'am. I belong to steel sector. First of all, we congratulate you for presenting a path-breaking budget, especially giving the push on infra and the capex. With respect to the steel, there are certain points which we thought of raising on the ease of business and the policy interventions. To start with, the first question is this: Government of India launched a scheme, authorized economic operators under customs, which gave a lot of facility for the trade and the ease of doing the business, wherein we need to pay the customs duty only once in a fortnight. It was working well, and the industry also came up with certain suggestions on automating that process. But of late, that process needs to be renewed on a yearly basis. That process is getting cumbersome, and today, as we speak, the industry is making the customs payment on case-to-case basis. If we can try to make a scheme by which this AEO can be simplified, that will probably help the industry to go back to what it was implemented maybe a year back. This is on the ease of doing business. Coming to the policy intervention, madam, as you know that, with the Hon'ble Prime Minister's commitment on the COP26 with the decarbonization of the industry. As a steel sector, we have no option. We need to move towards the green steel, which means the existing manufacturing of steel through the coking coal will have to be eventually moved towards the renewable energy and the hydrogen. Like the way you introduced a scheme, PLI, if there can be some kind of scheme which can be worked towards GLI, maybe the green linked incentive, and in my opinion, that we are today collecting the coal compensation cess of maybe 400 rupees from the coal which is being imported. If that fund can be utilized for bringing it back to do the green steel, that will help, because we know it's a long way to go, but that's the only way the industry can get the support on moving towards green steel. This is the second point, ma'am. The last but not the least is the anti-dumping on the steel. Our chairman, Mr. Sajjan Jindal, also talked with you after the post-budget that, yes, today the steel prices are high, maybe because of the international demand push, and especially during the last few weeks on account of the geopolitical situation. Probably all the raw materials are skyrocketing. Coking coal at $550 plus, iron ore at $150 plus. The input cost has gone up. You know that all the developed economy like United States have put in 25% on the dumping of steel. European Union has restricted with the quota system. It is not that the steel sector is not competitive. We will work towards being globally competitive. But if there can be some signal which can be sent to the entire world community that India is not the place for dumping, that will help the industry as a kind of this thing. These are the 3 points, and thank you.
The first point that you mentioned, I'm not quite aware of the operational issue. Mrs. Jha, if you would like to answer that. Ranjana Jha, are you there? No. You're there. Would you like to answer the first point on the AEO and are you aware of that issue? So would you like to answer that? Yeah. Yeah, Shrivas. Take the mic.
T1 enjoys the lesser facilitation, T2 a little higher, and T3 the highest standard. T1 has already been made, once given, it is need not be renewed at all unless it is revoked for the valid reasons. T2 and T3, they need to renew once in 3 years, and the T1, they need to just annually they need to give a intimation, that's all. So I'm not sure in which category the JSW falls in now.
On the issue of your anti-dumping duty, I think we had a look at that, and that is the reason that the anti-dumping duty went away. You know, on the anti-dumping duty, we have been actually analyzing not only for steel, for other items also. Let me also mention to you that we are the largest user of this anti-dumping duty in the world, and we surpass the second by a margin. So we have been using this issue a lot, and when we do that, we also have to see that while it may benefit some steel makers, but it also creates an issue with the people who are down below in the chain, the MSMEs especially. And we have noticed that in some of the cases, this anti-dumping duty has been in operation not for 5 years, but for 20 years, 25 years. Even after that, if you still feel that the anti-dumping duty is required, I think there is some issue. And this year, let me be very frank with the industry, that we have been very, very cautious in our evaluation of the anti-dumping duty, and we have tried to remove the anti-dumping duty from wherever we felt that the domestic industry was not getting any injury from it. On this, I think what you are mentioning is the budget announcements that we made. So we've had a look and we found that it is actually not operational. And this year, the steel industry has made huge amount of profit. Your capacity utilization has gone up. Your general revenues have also gone up. So we don't see the need. If at any given point of time in future, if something like that happens, DGTR will conduct an inquiry and give us a suggestion. On that issue, if you want to engage, you can engage with him separately.
Mr. Murugan, you spoke about transition towards cleaner energy sources to be done, and these issues have come up in several discussions, and we have agreed with the CII, wherein the chairman himself is from the steel industry, that we work with CII and the government to evolve policies, what kind of a support is needed, not necessarily, I'm not hinting at any physical support, but yes, there's an area where technologies are evolving, and the first step we have to ensure that the new expansion doesn't happen in a technology which is to be phased out. So that's the goal number one. Goal number two is what kind of a R&D is needed within our own country so as to get into a more cost-effective technologies. And number three, of course, is what kind of a regulations can be put into place. For example, renewables, when they are transmitted over a long distance, there's a cost associated with this, whether something can be done about it. And then lastly, of course, is the green hydrogen and what kind of a support may be needed. So I'll request you that your suggestion that how do we travel on that path, and that is going to be not just 1 or 2 years, it will take us at least a couple of decades to reach to that ambitious goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I call upon Shri Kamal Bali, President and Managing Director of Volvo Group India Private Limited and the Chairman of the Board of Swedish Companies in India, to ask his questions.
Good morning, ma'am, and welcome to Bengaluru, and thank you for this opportunity. Ma'am, first of all, would like to compliment you and your very highly engaged team for delivering such a refreshing and an inspiring budget. I'm sure this will set the virtuous cycle of demand, investment and jobs in the days ahead. Ma'am, I had a couple of points. The first point, of course, I completely agree with an earlier speaker on the APA, which I will discuss with Mr. Tarun Bajaj separately as well. So it's taking a little longer, and it's been more than 5 years since many APAs have been settled. So the basic purpose of APAs is not being served at this point in time. So that's one request. The second thing is manufacturing is going to be the key to the future of this country. And therefore, manufacturing needs a little support. And I think you have rightly taken many measures towards that, like the PLI scheme, the National Single Window Scheme, and the PM Gati Shakti. But I think logistics needs little more support. So I would recommend that items such as trucks and buses, which are doing a regular duty, they fall under the luxury tax rate of 28%. I would request, since now the GST collections are quite buoyant and stable, if you could look at this to be at the 18% rate, this will reduce the logistics cost in a big way, and this will make manufacturing more competitive. The last point I wanted to make was regarding the dividend distribution tax for foreign entities. And there is an MFN clause there. Unfortunately, the tax authorities are not accepting the MFN clause, the most favored nation clause, which is there within the treaty between the two. For instance, the rate between two countries is 10%, and the MFN rate is 5%. So as per law, you should be able to charge 5% dividend distribution tax, but tax authorities are not accepting that. So my request is, if you can look at that, that will also bolster a lot of foreign investments into the country. But overall, we are very, very delighted, very bullish on what the direction this budget has set out. Thank you very much.
I don't know whether the GST is bullish and that will sustain the state governments and the central government. I don't think so. And if we look at your rates, actually, unfortunately or fortunately, what has happened is that in the earlier regime, the excise duty was a hidden tax. Nobody knew what was the excise duty and only the VAT would come up. But I really would like to ask you, what was the VAT plus excise duty on buses and trucks before the GST came in? I'm sure it was more than 28%. So in that sense, I'll say that we'll have to wait. The revenues of both the states and the center are under tremendous strain, and I am not sure, though this is a council matter, I'm not too sure whether we'll be able to tinker with these rates, especially for these kind of goods in the immediate future. I really didn't get your DDT thing. Basically, what you're saying is for other countries, if we have a treaty which is 5%. So it's specific, you have made a general comment. Let me have a look if there's a specific case, but I'm not quite aware of the exact issue that you've raised.
The point on manufacturing, that it will be a major source of employment and growth is well appreciated, but my request would be that look at not this budget in particular places lot of emphasis on productivity improvement. Your suggestion that if you have to be good in manufacturing, provide certain incentives or provide some tax accommodation, that scope is rather limited, considering that among our peers, meaning the size country and other countries of our size, the tax to GDP ratio is not very high, is rather on the lower side. But the scope for productivity improvement is huge. And moving forward, where Indian economy goes, will have to be a play of investment, productivity growth, and what kind of a spin-off we generate. So this budget, when it announces ease of doing business 2.0, we have to look at it at not just the ease of doing business, but even of the cost of doing business. Sector after sector, looking at which are the areas where we can cut down cost, where we can improve the productivity. And please engage with us and through the concerned ministries and even directly with Finance Ministry as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I request Ms. Radha Ramanujan, CFO of Ashirwad Pipes Private Limited, to put forward her queries. Next, let me please request Ms. Vidya Sarthi, CFO of 3M India Limited, to share her thoughts.
Yeah, good morning, ma'am. Good morning, all. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I have couple of points to discuss. One is on the significant economic presence. Here, for supply of goods by overseas vendors into India, there is when he supplies beyond 2 crores of INR in a financial year, then we are required to collect certain documents from the vendor. For example, some tax documents. And what happens is the challenge that we face, the vendors are not really interested in giving these tax documents. And in this absence, what happens is we need to deduct 43.6% withholding tax. And it becomes very difficult for any corporate to absorb such huge taxes. So that is one issue that we have. The second one is on the equalization levy. The equalization levy is again on the overseas supplier. So here they are required to pay 2% on the sales value itself when there is as a tax here in India. So this again is a unilateral tax rate that we are charging the other overseas entity. So in intercompany transactions, when we already have transfer pricing regulations and arm's length pricing, so this 2% again becomes a little bit difficult for the overseas suppliers. So the request is, at least for intercompany transactions, I think we need to kind of modify this levy.
Well, I'm sure I'm going to ask Tarun to get into the details. We've had quite a lot of discussion on the equalization levy and also on the, please, why don't you sit down? Please sit down. And also the paperwork that is required for the vendor overseas to give you, for you to comply with your tax. I'm very clear. We didn't really bring in burdensome expectations on filing details. So I'm not sure what kind of paperwork is worrying you, or is it becoming a matter of hesitation for the vendor to share with you, if I've understood right. So I'll certainly get Tarun to get into the details. Equalization levy, I'm sorry, 1 minute. I know you represent your vendor who's sitting outside the country, and therefore you're saying we want all businesses to prosper, vendors who are dealing with Indian businesses to prosper as well, and you as well. But there are times that when India levies a tax, it levies because there's just a lot of activity going untaxed completely. I'm glad that you're able to voice for your vendor. But I also want you to give me suggestions about how much of money goes out of this country, the revenue for which is generated here, and those for which, after much thought, India's come up with the equalization levy. Even as the global taxation discussions happened last year, and now that we've come to an agreement on how much to tax, how to tax under the two-pillar regime, countries have actually taken this step, and India's not one in all the, in comparing to other countries, we are not one exceptional country. Many countries have taken this step. Vendors have gone to the courts saying, this is not right, your business is not here, my headquarters is there, but here the business is something else, and all this has become a veritable discussion ground, also going to the courts ground, and so on. The country's right to tax on economic activity which is generated within a country is absolutely established both in prior to these discussions and also post. So equalization levy, India has not done it just because it wants more money, but revenue earned here, turnover here, headquarters somewhere else, but India should not tax, is, I'm sorry, unacceptable. And globally too, in the context of the global tax which has been negotiated and agreed upon, that's not questioned. So implicitly, madam, if I've understood you right, implicitly somewhere conveying that the equalization levy is a unilateral measure, it is a measure of my sovereign right. And on my sovereignty, I have the right. You may say it is unilateral. And this has been disputed. So on the broad point, I'm sorry, your vendors' grievances shall be heard. But we are in India. We have a right to tax for the activities which generate revenue in India. But over and above that, if there are any diligence and burdensome compliances, yes, we'll hear it. I just want you to draw that fine line between yourself and the vendor.
I think the FM has given you a broader picture. I couldn't have given you better than that. I would just like to say this to the industry as a whole. You know, we had the last such agreement internationally maybe 100 years ago. It could have never been imagined that I can do business in a place without actually having a physical presence in that place. So all your tax rules of where the international or the countries would agree were based on that basic principle. But now, for example, Netflix or Facebook and companies like that, without having a presence in a country, are able to sell their products in the other country. The profits that they make are not because of the fact that, it is a fact that they are established in that country, they have developed over there. But it is also a fact that they're getting their consumers in this particular place. And India, a large consumer country, and every company in the world is actually looking at India as a consumer market. So it is very important for, I would say, the whole industry to stand up and tell to their international sellers that there is a tax which this country deserves to get and you should give it. Even now the discussions that are taking place will cover only companies perhaps with a turnover of 20 billion to start with. So the companies with lesser than 20 billion will still not be part of that. It will also have that there will be a threshold of profit. That threshold of profit will go to the country where they are physically present. It is only beyond that a certain percentage, a small percentage will be shared with the destination. So I would say that, it always happens in international discussions that the country that is more powerful or the country that has a better bargaining position is able to get that. Whatever little we get, I would say that I need your support of all of you, and not something where you say that because I am burdened by this 2% tax, so let me not pay. Why should I not get this tax? Because my consumer is buying this product and the profit that company is making is on account of the consumption made by the consumer in this country. So that is the logic, and we want to hold on to that logic, and I would say India has taken a major lead in these discussions, and now we are reaching that stage where we'll be able to get some taxes from these companies legitimately. I may also say the tax that we get on 2% is a very small tax. If the FM says that, or the government decides that we don't want it, it's not going to make a major dent in my total taxes, but it's a matter of principle and we should stick to that and get to that. The other thing which she's mentioned, I would welcome if there are some burdensome compliances that you face, please get back to me separately and we'll have a look at that.
Yeah, the thing that we wanted to bring in this is more on the definition part, because now it says all e-com operators, which could also mean if there is any kind of even purchase order raising or payment. So the definition is broad enough. So that is why if it certain clarifications are given, then it could be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I request Shri K.R. Sekar, President of Bengaluru Chamber of Industry and Commerce, to present his observations.
Good morning, ma'am. At the outset, from the chamber perspective, we thank you so much for being here and interacting with us. I just have 4 points which I'll brief you before you. And with the help of Mohandas Pai, we created a paper on reforms in tax administration and capital gains, which we would like to present it to the group, subject to your permission, ma'am. First point, ma'am, we have presented a great budget, which is a visionary budget from India's standpoint, of which we congratulate you from a chamber side. The government has taken a lot of measures on boosting the manufacturing. The one area which we personally believe from a chamber side is boosting the research and development, which is linked to the manufacturing. So if you are given a great benefit from R&D side by startup and defense sector in the current budget, but it would be great if you reduce the rate of tax for R&D companies which are linked to the manufacturing, not a contract R&Ds, but R&Ds which are linked to the manufacturing. It would be great if you reduce the rate of tax from R&D side. The second one, ma'am, we talked about the litigation management. The government, in fact, you have accepted our recommendation of not going on appeal from the department side on the matters which are High Court and Tribunal. We congratulate you for such a bold step. But there are a lot of domestic litigations, whether it is on the fault of taxpayer or anybody else. But what I would request, ma'am, if it is possible, to introduce a domestic arbitration reconciliation provision for certain amounts more than certain demands, so it would reduce the litigation. And other point, which already we got an answer, but I just want to appeal before you, regarding the APS and mutual agreement proceedings. Due to the 2 years of COVID, things could not progress further. If it progresses further, it would be a great measure from the India perspective. And the fourth point, ma'am, it is impacting the MSMEs. We have made an amendment to section 43B, by which if the loans on which interest are due and the interest gets converted into the loan, it will not be allowed as a reduction. It would impact MSMEs in the last 2 years because a lot of MSMEs could not pay interest. They restructured that loans, interest due to the loans, interest due on loans to the financial institutions. So if that interest is not allowed as reduction for those MSMEs on conversion of those interest into principal, MSMEs would be hit hard. So we request you to provide some provision for MSMEs. And the last but not the least, ma'am, you have given a great benefit for the infrastructure and the infrastructure industry. If possible, if you can reduce the rate of GST from cement from 28% to 18%, it would boost the low and medium budget housing. These are all the 4 points which I would like to present it to you, ma'am. And finally, if you agree, me and Mohandas Pai would like to come and give this booklet to you on capital gains and tax reform, ma'am, if it permitted. Mohan.
Maybe at the end of the session, no?
I don't know. When I noted down, I think there are 6 points, not 4 points. Mr. Sekhar, I don't know what are you wanting to say that on R&D the taxes should be reduced. Are you saying that companies that are doing R&D should not even pay 22%, should pay lesser?
Rate of tax for manufacturing companies to 15%. Yes. And exclusive R&D companies which are dedicated to manufacturing, because unless you boost the R&D, manufacturing cannot come up. Therefore, what my request is that if it is possible to reduce the rate of tax, even R&D also to 15% like a manufacturing company, which are linked to manufacturing, that would be a great benefit for the R&D, sir. That's what I would suggest that.
Okay. I'll not make too much of mention of that. I've taken your point, though I would say that Ms. Kiran is here and she every time meets me, tells me on this issue. But on R&D, we had the weighted deduction, the expenditure, but we did not notice any increase spent by the private sector in spite of the fact that at one point you had 250%, which came down to 200%, 150%, and now also 100%. And now also the tax deduction that you get on R&D expense is like, it's not depreciated over a period of time, but you get it in the year of your spend. So to that extent, there is already a benefit of the R&D spend that you get. So I think the tax regime, I would say that 15%, 22% and 30% is there to stay. Let's not expand that. The R&D spend, there is a thing which I think one of you might ask is the research foundation. I think that is the area on the expenditure side that we should use. On the litigations and domestic arbitration, let me say that for the smaller disputes, we are going to come up with a dispute resolution committee. So the rules for that are getting ready, and very soon, in the next month or 2 months, we should be coming out with those. So that would greatly help the smaller tax disputes. On the other disputes, we had the Vivad Se Vishwas. If there's some other suggestion, something else was also said by the earlier speaker, we would look forward to what is your suggestion and how do we take it forward. Though I have one request from the industry and I'll watch it, and maybe next year when we are here, I'd like to give a report card on that. There's one particular provision in this budget which says that if there's a dispute going on between me, department, and you as an assessee, and you have won in the tribunal and the matter has gone to the High Court, and a similar dispute arises with the gentleman next to you, then we will not file an appeal. For us not to file an appeal, you have to agree that you will abide by the decision that I get in your court. Now the lawyers will act against us in this because they will lose business. So I would like you as industry to ensure that this actually succeeds. Because the lawyers will come back and tell us and tell you, no, it is a different case. Mr. Sekhar as a weak lawyer, they lose the case. What will happen? Let's fight the case. So I would say that in reducing litigation, as was mentioned earlier, you also have a major role to play. On the APS, I said there was a lot of backlog, but I'm very fine to listen to you and see what more we can do. But I assure you that in the next few months, we will push this APA thing in a big way. Interest on loan and debentures is a very interesting thing that you mentioned. I should mention to the industry here. I think the provision already is that if you convert your interest into a loan, then that is not allowed as an expenditure because you have not paid for it. And this has remained on the statute for a long time. But instead of converting into a loan, you started converting into bonds and debentures and started taking that. So litigation will increase. The logic of not allowing a loan, but because debenture and bonds is not written there, so I'll convert it into debenture and bonds and do it. I'm going into the litigation aspect, so we have also clubbed that particular loophole this time. Our view is that we will give you the expenditure when you expend it. If you're converting into a loan, you're creating a liability which is going to the balance sheet. Unless you spend it, you will not get that benefit. So to that extent, it has not been allowed because there has been no cash outflow from the side of the company, so that is not allowed. On cement, 28 to 18%, it's a council matter, so I'll not like to dwell in detail except say that the revenue neutral rate on GST was 15.3, today we are at 11.6. So I think we need to rationalize and ensure that the tax revenues come both to state or center, otherwise we'll again start having these potholes in roads and other areas. I look forward to your capital gains and tax. You've heard me in the earlier I think Chennai or somewhere where I mentioned a lot of capital gains are being made by rich people. Please pay taxes.
Thank you. Now I call upon Shri P.C. Rao, President of Bengaluru Hotels Association, to share his thoughts.
Good morning, madam. Hotel industry and tourism industry is the first to suffer and last to recover in the last COVID-19, as you are all aware. We have just 3 requests to support us during this period. First of all, GST means one nation, one item, one rate. Unfortunately, our cooking gas is having 5% when purchased by all of us in domestic, and for us there is 18% GST. There is a dual rate for one item. Secondly, as somebody has already told, yesterday there was a shocking news that our rate from 5% will be going to increase. Please withhold for few years, at least for us to recover. Last but not the least, under 43B of the section, when we pay our statutory EPF or ESA, even 1 day is 1 week delayed, it was disallowed from our expenditures. It is very, sometimes it happens, even in the EPF portal will not work sometimes, and sometimes we don't have the money. Definitely we don't have the money. The companies like BHEL, HMT is not paying us even 120 days, 180 days also, many a times. And we are not able to pay the EPF contribution, but we pay the interest for it to the EPF and ESA. But disallowing from the expenditure is very heavy loss for anybody. Kindly consider, we have a lot of requests on this. Already lot of cases are also going on in the court. I think it is not fair. When we pay the interest, disallowing from the expenditure is not fair. Please consider, madam. Thank you for giving us the opportunity, for your good support also. In the last GST, you have supported us in reducing the rate from 18 to 5 on our request, also for catering. Thank you once again. Thank you for the opportunity.
We've had a separate meeting with the hotel industry post the budget, in which representatives of the Reserve Bank were also present, only to address the specific issue of recovery which is getting delayed in the hotel and hospitality sector. So as regards restructuring your loan, as regards any other issues that you have, we've had a complete discussion. Secretary Banking was there, Reserve Bank representative, in fact the ED was also there, and so on. So the larger issues of hospitality and tourism are being attended to. Also for civil aviation, we've had a separate meeting, just so that you get some kind of a relief from the various announcements. But the specific example that you've taken of cooking gas, and I recognize that you probably, you have recognized that there is a differential rate for domestic use as opposed to the use in commercial. You want the commercial rate also to be equal to domestic? But aren't you selling your food? At home, I don't sell to my children. So, I mean, I don't know. Probably I'm missing out on the logic with which you want to say treat both equally. I don't know if I've understood wrong. That's one. And second, of course, Tarun, you have further to add on it?
I think FM has put it very nicely. I was just wondering what does the food cost me at home and what does it cost me at a restaurant? If it costs me the same, I'll rather have 5% paid for commercial gas also. But also the fact is that it is an input tax, so you would be getting, okay, because your food, you have made it 5%. No, you were so keen that I want my food to be at 5%, so you don't get input tax credit. You should not have agreed to bring, or you should not have asked for it to be brought down from 18 to, or 12 to 5. You would have got this, and this wouldn't have mattered whether it was 18 or 5. So I think we should not ask what FM has said. We should see that there's a difference. On the other thing, I would not like to mention people who have not read that news, let them not be alarmed by that. Some of the journalists, I don't know, sometimes I come in the morning and I realize that this is the work that I did last evening, because in the morning newspaper it says what I did the last evening. So don't go so much, don't have a lot of faith in the fourth estate in that sense. On the delayed payment to Epfo, we'll have a look. I have no idea about that, but what you're saying is that whenever we make the payment, we should be allowed that expenditure. So we have taken that point and we'll have a look. We'll talk. Yeah, so we will take a look and we'll talk to the Labour Ministry about it.
Thank you. Now, I would like to call upon Dr. I.S. Prasad, President, FKCCI, to ask his questions.
Good morning, Madam. First, I would like to compliment for the visionary budget of next 25 years in 75th year of independence. I have few sessions and I'm greatly acknowledge the initiative by removing the anti-dumping duty for arresting the price of raw materials. It's very good move. As regard to MSME, because FKC represents all the 30 district chambers and MSME segment, you have been rightly given the 2 lakh crores for additional facilities. And when government guarantee given 5 lakh crores for all these loans, why the banks classify as NPA? Because the moment they classify NPA and everything, CIBIL rating is the one concern for all MSME. Though we have been seen up to 7.5 crores loan, they should not insist, but banks still making that CIBIL rating if you can able to differ. The other thing is ease of doing business, madam. The 206H talks about TCS, tax collector source on supply of goods to customers. And 194Q has been brought if I have to make payment for supplies. I think both are really very cumbersome for the applicability of the provisions. Either retain as TCS or 194Q TDS. As regard to the cancellation of toll registrations, if any assessment year, this new budget, new taxation talks about that cancellation of toll for registration for all the previous years. I think that has to be relooked into this one. And GST, we've been asking the higher rate of tax like 18% to 24%. You rightly brought last time amnesty scheme for defaulters. But I request now, the department has initiated audit, the every rate of even because of the input credit and advance ruling. Madam, would like to suggest why can't we bring National Code of Direct Taxes, which have been proposing, thereby the one rule, one nation, whatever the decisions can be applicable, especially in GST advance ruling. Each state, each have different views. And especially when the trade has not been built, while been selling goods, the advance ruling have classification, there are 3 more. We have prepared a budget, post-budget memorandum. And PM Gati Shakti is very important, which have been wanted to support all the infrastructure because nation is being required. I would like to mention here, Karnataka is the 1,60,000 crores this time is going to be contributed for the income tax. and the GST also been recently been contributing. I request, though it's not out of sight and everything, if the PM Gati Shakti project be implemented where the states and your vision to one district, one nation, one product is very important. And what I request is 75th year of independence, we want to bring the concept of real income. The presumptive tax of 6%, 8% on if they don't get the audit of accounts is very high. I think nobody is making profit of 6%, 8%. Just merely they're not able to get their accounts audited. Why they have to pay on presumptive tax, madam? The third important is, in the case of partnership firm in presumptive tax, no remuneration on partners been allowed. I think we have been giving the submission which can be looked into. And most important, how MSME can be given subvention interest scheme, at least because they've been giving 30% of GDP and 40% employment, especially employment for skilled and non-skilled. If the budget talks about some incentives for MSME by way of subvention scheme for 1 or 2 years, it will be great helpful, ma'am. Thank you.
Any outstanding, if it is not paid within 90 days, then it becomes an NPA. It has to be reported to CIBIL. And in case an additional loan is given, what I understand is perhaps that some additional loans were given under the ECLGS, and so if the payments were not due at the time. Were not overdue at the time when those loans which were guaranteed under ECLGS were given, then they need not have been reported to CIBIL. But if there is any specific issue related to your individual case, we can certainly have a look at it.
Sure.
I'm not too sure. You went too fast on your questions on the tax front, whether I've got them all or not. So when you talk of the TCS, you're talking of that 0.01%.
Yes, sir.
So we had this last year, and I have got this message from a number of you that the compliance burden is quite a bit. But let me say this, that when I discuss this internally, I find that a lot of tax revenue improvement that has come in the current year is also because of this. Because this is applicable only to, not to all, but to certain where the I think transaction is more than 50 lakhs and the turnover is more than a certain 10 crores, or I may be wrong on that, but it's something like that. So because now that is TCS is being deducted there, that is being shown in the GST return, it is being shown in the income tax return. These two returns are now being matched very frequently. So we find that our tax revenues and I think the compliances in the trade have increased a lot. So I think that was the idea, to keep that. But I take your point. I accept that point that there is a compliance burden. We'll have a look in the future. This year we can't do anything. The budget is over. The finance bill is over. So that's why I'm a little blunt to tell you that don't have hope for this year. We'll see it next year. On the presumptive tax, I also have a view on the presumptive tax. In some ways, I feel we should do away with the presumptive tax. Write an article on that. Let's see what is the reaction of people who are using this presumptive tax to not pay the taxes on income that they are earning. In fact, I have received a lot of suggestions that you should do away with that. It reduces the burden, but at the same time, a lot of people are actually limiting themselves to that limit and paying only so much of tax while their tax may be much higher. You want to say something?
Sir, especially you take the distribution. If I am a super distributors, or if I am direct to dealers, wholesale manufacturers, in the presumptive tax, where is the profit? When the gross profit itself being given at 6% by the company, how you expect me to declare 6% on the net profit?
Please correct me if I am wrong. It is not essential for you to take this provision, no? You can do your P&L and file your return.
Now, once you say that it should be subject to audit, ease of doing business, you've been enhanced from 5 crores to 10 crores without doing any audit. But here you put, suppose you declare less than 8%, then again you have to go to the audit. So this has been conducted. I think it helps a lot of manufacturers, especially last 2 years. If you say that they have to reduce the
cost. So basically you're saying that there should be a presumptive tax without audit.
No, yes, that is first. Second thing also, the rate of declaration, 6%, 8%, when you say that everything been trust, reposed on the confidence of the business person, when you got GST, when you know that gross profit itself is not 6% given by the manufacturers, how we expect us to give?
So I'm saying that you prepare a P&L you prepare a P&L and file the return. Nobody is asking you, forcing you to come under the presumptive tax. Sorry, I didn't see you. You want to say something, Mr. Patwari?
And they can prepare the P&L account, and even if it is worked out even minus, negative also, they can still file the return. If it is worked out 1%, they can pay 1% tax on it. So there is no issue on
Mr.
that.
Patwari is saying that if you have losses, you can also carry it forward for the next 8 years.
You so don't... Subject audit, what we've been received from MSME and everything, if I have to offer less than 6%, 8%, then I should get subject audit. So...
No, okay, let's not drag this argument. What we are saying is that in case you don't feel comfortable with the presumptive tax, that's an advantage given to the people. You file your P&L, you file your return, you file what your actual income is. If you have a loss, file the loss. There is nobody stopping you on that.
Thank you. Next, I request Shri Muralidhar Krishna Rao, General Manager and CFO, Karnataka Bank Limited, to put forward his queries.
Good morning, Madam. I have got only two requests. One is that Section 25(4) of the GST Act 2017 provides that a person who has obtained or is required to obtain more than one registration, whether in one state or union territory, or more than one state or union territory, shall, in respect of each registration, be treated as a distinct person, and tax has to be paid accordingly. But based upon this decision, department is insisting that whatever head office has been spending, the expenditure has to be shared between the states, different branches of the different states, and GST has to be paid on that. Actually, it is revenue neutral, because even if I pay the GST, that will be eligible for the benefit to me again, back. But this will lead to operational difficulties in the bank, because we need to unnecessarily raise the invoices between the different branches of the bank along with by the head office. So if you want to avoid some operational hazard, I think this particular section, can it be possible that it is not applicable to the banking sector? Because GST in all, it is uniformly made applicable irrespective of the category of the unit for which it belongs. My second question is related to direct taxes, wherein under Section 36(1)(7)(a), we have been allowed a deduction of 8.5% of the rural advances and 10% of the profits, whatever we are making out of that, as a deduction to the extent of provision made. But nowadays, because of the various stress that has been in the banking sector, banks are making provision much higher than the eligible deduction which I have specified. So is it possible that entire provision made for NPA is eligible for deduction under the Income Tax Act? These are the only two suggestions.
Tarun, just 1 minute. I'm very curious to know if the CBIC here, the two boards and CBDT, are you all engaging with your own assessees? When the questions which are being asked are not those questions where I want the secretaries of the Ministry of Finance sit here and explain. These are for the boards to be with your assessees, tell them where the hitch is, and if there is a policy tweak required, or if there is a requirement to change something in the finance bill, yes, opportunity is here before you. But many of these questions I find are things which the boards are fully empowered to deal with. It just tells me, and I'm sorry to have to comment like this on the boards, are you all sitting in your own office and not even accessing your assessees? What's going on? You're not expecting the Revenue Secretary to be talking to you all, talking to the assessee for things which you have every power in your hand to sit and explain. Am I overreading the situation? I would now tell the CBDT and the CBIC to please keep your Saturdays free, engage with the assessees, and give them all the clarification required. Where you think you cannot do because it's something to do with the Act itself or with the rules which have been passed by the board, then get the boards to do it or tell the Revenue Secretary accordingly. I'm sorry to, come out like this. Many of the issues which are being asked are not budget related. They're more the rules and other things which you framed and you're trying to impose it because that's how, business has to carry forward. I'm sorry, the boards will have to do better. You will have to be here every Saturday, keep yourself open, and also on the phone and the emails. Many of the questions here which Tarun has bothered to answer, I would want you to answer in person to the assessees. I'm sorry, you're welcome to ask us questions on the board. You still wanting to answer?
Ma'am, why let it go unanswered? Though, with your
permission. Please go on.
So if I understood you correctly, what you were saying was that for services industry, if you can pay the GST at one place. Is that the answer? I have received this suggestion from elsewhere also. Let me see, it's after a long time that we have been able to stabilize the IT system in the GST, and now there's no problem on that. So what will happen is that we'll have to have a system where you deposit the tax and whatever form we need you to fill, or so then it will have to be distributed on SGST to the various states that it is there, and it will have to come to the center for CGST. I think this is what you're saying. So this is an interesting suggestion. It will reduce the compliance burden to a great extent. I acknowledge that. But I think I have just got it 10 days ago. I had a discussion with somebody and this idea came. So let me take my time to discuss and see whether it is feasible. After spending the whole of the last year on the direct taxes portal, I don't want to disturb the indirect taxes portal and be busy only with this work. So let me see what I can do, but I completely understand and appreciate your concern.
Just one more word on that. I think more from a state government perspective. I think the service industry needs to understand that GST is a federal tax. So it's very easy for industry to pay it in one place at its headquarters, which means most of the GST from banking will go to one state in this country, because there's an SGST element, which is why the states insist on these separate registrations, so that to the extent that Karnataka Bank's business takes place in states other than Karnataka, that SGST goes to those states. Similarly, State Bank is headquartered in Bombay. It's not okay for the other states if the entire GST is paid in Bombay. Now, this is the solution that he's talking about. But I just want you to understand, it's not some crazy illogicality that this has been created. It has been created because while you have an interest in paying it simply, the states have an interest in getting the revenue that is due to each state from the banking activity taking place in that state. That is the complication. So solution is being looked for.
Thank you. Now we have Shri Devanathan Raghavan, CFO of N. Rangarao and Sons Private Limited.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I have basically two suggestions on this budget, not any specific issues. One is, while we represent this Rangaravan company, we are manufacturing cycle pure agarbattis. In agarbatti, 2 years back, government banned the import of agarbatti with a view to encourage Atmanirbhar Bharat. Last 2 years, we have been doing quite a bit on developing our supply chain system to supply raw batti for us. But the cost has gone up tremendously. Coupled with that, the government has increased the custom duty from 10% to 25% on bamboo import. If the government can consider some kind of allowance in under Section 80I of Income Tax Act for a finite period, I'm sure this problem will be there for many industries, whoever is doing import substitution. So if you can give some kind of allowance to encourage the industries to set up domestic downstream supplies for our raw material and inputs, that will help us and encourage us to implement this Atmanirbhar scheme in a faster way. That is one. Then second point is, our government is encouraging a lot for MSME financing like trade scheme and all, but this is applicable only for manufacturing industry. If some kind of such scheme is made applicable for our supply chain like distributors and retailers. That will help us to increase the liquidity for all these distributors and retailers, which will increase the business for us. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Patwari, can you explain what is ATI? Investment allowance.
Investment allowance. Investment allowance is for capital, whereas here we are spending a lot of money. Like if you take for example Rabati, when we were importing Rabati, we could import it for 62 rupees or 63 rupees. Now when we are buying in the local market, it has gone up to 68 rupees, and when we are manufacturing in-house, it is coming to 72 rupees or 74 rupees. Coupled with this, there is a lot of, in our FMCG industry, packing material cost has gone up because of board price increase. There are a lot of other associated cost increase, which we are not able to pass on to the final customer because of the competition in the market, and it is not possible for us to do odd pricing. 5 rupees packet, we cannot increase it to 6 rupees and all. So this kind of encouragement, if for a finite period, till we set up our downstream supply chain, if it is given, it will be helpful for us.
Very candidly, I'll only say that as a matter of policy, we are very reluctant to provide benefits for these kind of issues that you're raising, because these kind of issues would not only be restricted to agarbattis, they would be applicable to a lot of other industries, so it will not be possible. So revenue is not the right route to give any incentives. If any incentive has to be given, it should be given upfront on the expenditure route or some liquidity support from the banks, like what has happened in the ECLGS. As a matter of policy, I would say this is not a good way to provide any benefits, and it only leads to distortions and leakages. So that would be the short answer that I'll have to you. You should, if others are selling at that price, I don't know what is it. Are they all selling it at losses or whatever? So you'll have to have a look at that. This is a competition issue. This is a market issue, and not an issue on costs which the government needs to subsidize.
I'll just like to add, you're talking about the imported bamboo that is typical for use in agarbatti industry, whose cost is much cheaper when you import it, whereas we've now said, because of the duty also, we've now said we want to be Atmanirbhar, use the bamboo which is available within India, and that bamboo is more expensive than what you've been importing all the while, right? Yeah.
Not only that, the kind of bamboo that we need is not available.
No, I've heard this particular argument, and government has made an attempt which may not be immediately impacting you. It might take a year or two for that variety of bamboo which has to be cultivated in the Northeast. The bamboo mission is doing that job, and that quality of bamboo that you want for your agarbatti, which doesn't become scaled even as you hold it and all that, is happening. But I know it is not going to help you this year. It might happen gradually. But even then, you have to, because now the access to the cheaper, more suitable bamboo is not as cheap as it was before. You need to send me a paper, which I'll certainly move over to the decision-making departments on it and see what best can be done. Tax and other incentives may not be the proper route, but let me see if the other concerned departments which have come up with this, and this is one of the very important schemes which the government has taken up, and because Northeast also can benefit from the quantum of bamboo that they grow, let me see where an intervention can be made. I'm not talking about tax concessions, but otherwise.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ma'am, we have 3 more questions. With your permission, can we take all of them together, ma'am? So I request Shri Satish Machani, CMD of Stump Shul and Somappa Springs Private Limited, Shri Murli Krishna, President of Pinya Industries Association, and Ms. Pratiksha Singh, Herbalife International, to give their questions one by one.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sirs. I represent ACMA, which is Automotive Component Manufacturers Association. Our question is actually very simple and singular. When GST was implemented in 2017, nearly 70% of the parts attracted 28%. At the moment, it's only about 30% because of the various interactions that we have had with the department and in the industry. All I request is if it could be considered to make an uniform 18% across. Significant portion of our parts are actually going in the aftermarket as well, and we believe this could improve compliance. This is our humble request, ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am, good afternoon. I'm representing India Industries Association, wherein we have almost 10,000 small industries. We make a turnover of 3,000 to 4,000 crores per annum. We help a lot of nation building. The main problem before post-COVID, post-COVID is most of these small industries has gone to sick. Because of this, my submission, humble submission is to relax the TOD. Earlier, people used to give TOD, temporary OD for the smaller sector. Now, I don't know, the banks have stopped it by providing temporary OD. They used to provide, depending on the CC amount, 10% of the amount is to the MR for the TOD. Now, they have stopped it. I request you to extend that TOD facilities for the smaller sectors. And also, though, there is a steep hike in raw materials. We have given enough requests to central and state, which has been not materialized yet. My submission is to kindly look out that raw materials should be stopped. Steep rise of stock should be stopped. Thank you, madam.
Good afternoon, ma'am, and the entire panel. First of all, thank you for giving us this opportunity to come and discuss our questions or concerns with this learned panel. So, ma'am, quickly, without taking too much time, and while most of my senior colleagues here have spoken about a lot of the things here, talking specifically about the ease of doing business in India and the focus of the entire government or the industry to boost India and make India more attractive, is it possible to ease out some of the compliances? Or rather, let me put it differently, a couple of small questions which I think could help in furthering the aim of doing business in India. So the first one was that could we look at simplifying the compliances, say the TDS, TCS compliances? While we know that the intent is to ensure that the tax net covers all possible transactions, but somewhere there are a lot of responsibilities cast on the payers. So is it possible to look at those and somewhere rationalize or simplify the compliances? Of course, litigation, a lot of my colleagues have spoken about speeding up litigation and making litigation more easy for everybody. Another thing was that when we have the 15% rate for the manufacturing industry, could we look at extending that even to contract manufacturers, where we are not doing manufacturing in-house in our premises, but in effect we are the ones who are owning the manufacturing being done by our contractor. So could we look at extending that rate also? Similarly, the ATG benefit, which is now not available on CSR expenditure. We as an organization are, and like most of the other organizations here, are very focused on CSR and we spend heavily there. If we are allowed to get a ATG on that, read together with whatever the ATG rules permit, that will really be very helpful in rationalizing our tax rates, ma'am.
Ma'am, first one on ease of doing business. During past 2 years, close to about 25,000 plus compliances all over the country have been cleaned up. But what the way forward which we envisage, and I'll request you to make your suggestions in that regard, you can send it to us, is to look at principle-based cleaning up of compliances as a wholesale approach, like trust-based governance, which this budget says very clearly. What else can be done? Please make suggestions to us so that in different sectors and different walks of the economy, we can then move towards that direction. Thank you.
I take your point on compliances. I'm answering the last bit first, the last question. But I also want to, I've said this earlier, I'll repeat it here again, that this is the data for 1920. That 11 crore people paid us TDS and TCS, but only 7 crore filed the returns. And I quite acknowledge that everybody who's giving a TDS TCS may not be required to file the return, but there are a large number of people that we are finding are not filing returns in spite of the fact that their TDS TCS is, say, 25,000, 50,000, that runs into lakhs of people. So I think as a nation, once we become compliant, voluntarily compliant, I think these compliances will gradually move out. But till the time that we are not that compliant, I think we would rather have more of such compliances built into it. I'll just give you an example which concerns the industry. This year we have brought in a provision where if you give a perquisite or you give this benefit to your agents, to your other people, that is allowed as an expenditure in your expenditure. For example, you take your best 20 salespersons to Singapore with their families and spend money on that. That expenditure is allowed as an expenditure in your books of accounts, but the other person doesn't show it in his perquisites and doesn't pay taxes on it. So we have brought in the TDS now. So it will be ensured that once the TDS comes, it is part of 26 AS, that person will definitely then have to show that as an income in his return and pay taxes. So my humble request is that till the time that we become more compliant as a society, I think these compliance. Today, for example, the principal's chief here is here, and yesterday I had a review. 56% of the taxes of Bengaluru region come in TDS. So, though the salaries forms a major component of that, but there are others also, and there are still people who are not paying taxes. The contractors, even government institutions, autonomous institutions that are getting work done from the contractors are not deducting, and we don't get that income from the contractor side. So that's very important. On the ATG and CSR, I think industry should make up its mind whether it wants to do CSR or it says, I will not do CSR. Then you fight, will not do CSR. Let the government do CSR. If you are doing CSR, let it be like that. Earlier there was a request that CSR should be treated as an expenditure and not after profit after tax. The government has encouraged you through a law. The finance secretary might give you a history sometime. He was there in corporate affairs when this was coming up. That 2% is something which, CSR is something that you wanted the government to have some rules or law on that. Now, if it has come, you spend that 2% and spend it with willingly rather than grudgingly. On 18% tax, I would not like to respond to that on the motor parts. I think on the manufacturing companies, my understanding is if there is a new manufacturing company that comes up, whether it is doing contract manufacturing for somebody or not, if it falls within that definition, it will get 15% tax. That company will be a separate SPV and will get that tax exemption. That's my understanding.
One question was raised on, one mention was made that temporary OD is not being allowed now by the banks. So I'm not sure whether it is due to some change in any regulations or law. If that is so, please share it with us. And in case it is a specific matter, then perhaps you can.
Sir, earlier they used to provide a temporary OD and ad hoc systems for for this collateral and all. Now they have stopped it, sir. Temporary OD for the CCs.
So what is the reason for that? Is there any change?
We don't know. The bank people are saying that facilities have been stopped. You need to go for enhancement.
Okay, so we can engage with you separately. If you can share the details
if that is reintroduced, it will be a huge profit for the benefit for the MSME sector, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
I would like to just supplement this. The ECLGS, the entire scheme has been brought in to provide additional working capital in the context of the pandemic impact. Not temporary OD. Now, there has to be that if you require on a permanent basis, then get it an additional working capital limit itself sanctioned.
Ma'am, can I ask a question, please?
I thought the 3 questions were already over and done with, and you were anyway going to come and give us a huge big report.
No, I am persona non grata for the department in Bengaluru, so my name was not there. I didn't even get a seat. So anyway, if you, with your permission, I'll ask a question.
No, nobody's a persona non grata. You have ways with your words. You always accuse us. You say you didn't invite us, you didn't. Whereas yours is the only voice, so loud in Bangalore.
Yes, madam.
The rest of them had to be given an opportunity.
Absolutely, madam.
In the same spirit as you say you're a persona
Absolutely,
non grata,
madam.
I would like to say you've always been heard.
Yes,
Come
madam.
on, Mohandas Pai.
Yes, madam. Madam, first of all, congratulations, a great budget. I think it is truly outstanding.
This is typical Mohandas.
No, I'll tell you why.
This is typical Mohandas. He's so good at immediately making up, and you've done this, you've done that, great, brilliant, whatever, but he had already knocked me off.
I will tell you why. You have a dream team after a long time. I want to compliment you on your dream team. For the first time in India's history, we've seen RE go up by 3 lakh crores, which has not happened for the last 35 years. I studied the budget. And our estimate is your revenue on 31st of March will go up by another 1 to 1.5 lakh crores. I'm sure Tarun and Soma know about it. I'm sure they calculated that. The calculations are very simple to do. And this has set the pace for reforms. So with your dream team, we want greater reforms in future. Madam, one big strategic issue we wanted to consider is Western sanctions in the recent Ukraine war had demonstrated the power of tech platforms for payment, search, credit cards, cloud, data, internet, etc. We need a special response from government to make us Atmanirbhar in all these areas. So tomorrow something happened, we stand up as independent foreign policy. We will not be subject to such sanctions. The US is threatening to sanction us for buying that equipment from Russia too. So we need a team, some thinking to be done. I think focus on R&D, focus on research. Focus on research in universities. That 50,000 crore fund in the new education policy, all that requires certain kind of focus. Second, along with that, please solve the tax ESOP issues of the startups. Now, startups are a force multiplier. 40 of the 93 unicorns. We had 10 unicorns in January and February. 40 of the 93 unicorns are outside India because of RBI regulations, compliance issues with RBI. It is a mess. RBI doesn't listen. We've gone to them many times. If you can take a meeting and listen to us for RBI, it will be very grateful because I think it's important. Next point, madam. Madam, tax disputes are out of control. I would urge you to look at them in a very significant way. To give you some data, number of appeals with CIT appeals has doubled from 2.15 lakhs in 13-14 to 4.58 lakhs in 19-20. I don't know the improvement after that, but it's something that needs to be looked at. We need data. And the amount locked up has gone from 2.87 lakh crores to 8.83 lakh crores in 19-20. There must have been a reduction in the Vishwas scheme, but we need the lead data. Can we have data every quarter released by the department about tax disputes? 70% of the tax disputes raised by the department is lost in appeal, either in the tribunal or the high court. It's a very bad record. So we're having unnecessary disputes. We need something to do. And madam, there's a data given by C&AG, which I want to just give you the data. About 98.5% of the 16 lakh crores of total arrears of demand, C&AG says demand difficult to recover. So there are serious problems in tax disputes. We'd like you to look at them separately and resolve them. The next thing, madam, last 2 points. We need three, madam, if you look at the average income declared under salaries in 17-18, for which there is data, we need data for the later years. Salary income, apart from the 2.5 lakh first 2 slabs, is an average of 7.94 lakhs. Business is only 5.14 lakhs. People who declare income under business and professions don't seem to be paying their share of taxes. For that, the only way out as a policy is to expand the tax slabs instead of 7 to 3, and that can be done by reducing all deductions under 80C. Section 80C has a deduction of 1.06 lakh crores. You're losing the revenue. Last year you did the 7 slab. Can you make it a 3 slab so that 60-70% of people can go under that and really improve tax matters? Last policy, madam. With tax complications and technology, the gap between what industry wants and what possibly government looks at could expand. Can you have a tax expert group to the finance ministry or the revenue secretary who could meet once a quarter, discuss all the new tax issues? With the intention you get more revenue, with the intention there's greater compliance, with the intention we don't have disputes. Why should we have disputes when both of us work together? We are part of the same country. Can you have a tax expert group for tax experts from industry and profession so that we could sit together, discuss, and see the tax proposals are done in a proper manner. Thank you very much.
Mr. Pai, just a small remark. I am not here to defend anybody. This forum today is to talk about budget and what, in the furtherance of the implementation of the budget, what can be done. But it will be a loose comment to make that RBI does not listen. They may not agree with your viewpoint. Like we here, we have heard all the sessions, we hear your sessions very carefully, we consider them, we find some of them not feasible and we don't act upon it. Others, we act upon it. If you feel that there is an issue with RBI has any fiscal element, any policy issue for the government, we'll all be all ears. Thank you.
Ajay, let me say this. If you write a letter to RBI asking for approval, they don't reply. You had to hire a big four to go to Bombay, walk on the tables and get your approval. It's a sad reality of India. Please accept that. I spoke to Dr. Rajan. He came to Bengaluru. He tried to improve matter. It improved. I spoke to Dr. Shaktikant Das in Bombay. I met him several times and spoke to him. But no, we don't see an improvement. It's not like interacting with you. They don't respond to letters. Why can't you have a status where everybody has to respond to a query or give an approval within 45 days? Then the problem will be solved. We have to hire a big four, pay them money, they go to Bombay, they go everywhere. Why should we do that? Please believe me.
Thank you. Any other queries or suggestions, please email them to us and we will forward it to the right forum. Today's interactive session covered an array of key sectors of economy and nuances of tax policy. The observations that were brought forward were multifarious and touched upon key topics including automobile sector growth, healthcare financing, impact of international geopolitical developments on iron and steel sector, details of authorized economic operator program, and rationale behind equalization levy. The diverse ideas discussed in this forum today have been very enlightening for all of us and will contribute immensely towards shaping the economic policy of the country. With that, we have come to an end of today's post-budget interaction session. We express our sincere gratitude to the Honorable Union Minister of Finance and Corporate Affairs for giving the trade community in Bangalore this opportunity to interact with the government. We thank the Ministers of State for Finance for their kind presence. We also thank all the senior secretaries of Ministry of Finance for their patient responses and the esteemed members of the trade, industry and media for their enthusiastic participation. Now, we request your presence at the Grand Foyer Hall just outside for the high tea. I thank you all once again. Have a great day.